Rosen, and I will be the host. But the focus will be primarily on Linda Sanchez, who's the EVP and CHRO from Bryn Mawr Trust, and Alexis Johnston, who is the manager of people and processes with Helping Hands Family. So we're excited to have you here today, and we'll just start getting started. So, Fast Company is one of the leading magazines about business and fast-growing companies, and this is going to really mean a lot to many HR leaders in terms of what we're going to be looking at as employees start to come back to the office and how that's going to work. So that's what we're going to talk to a little bit about the past and what was working last year, and then what's hopefully going to be working for companies going forward. So just a little bit about the Rosen Group. Been in business for about 26 years. We specialize in placing HR folks. We do contract to hire, direct hire. We also offer coaching services, and we have a partnership on HR technology. And business is very busy right now. And so if anybody's looking for an HR position or wants to discuss their career, please feel free to reach out to me at scott.rosen@rosengroup.com. I'll put that in the chat. And you can always look at our website as well, which is www.rosengroup.com, because we post all our positions there. So we're going to kind of break this up into a couple of pieces. We're going to have Linda from Bryn Mawr Trust. We're going to have a conversation with her. And your questions are very welcome. And we'll talk about how to get those questions in. And then we'll switch over to Alexis to discuss her experience with Helping Hands. Also, both Linda and Alexis were honorees at this past year's HR Department of the Year, so we'll touch on that briefly as well. So again, you'll be muted during the presentation. Right now we have about 35 people, probably get some more trickling in. You will be muted, but if you do want to ask a question or make a comment, you can raise your hand, or you can put your question or comment in the chat box, and we'll look for those questions while Linda is presenting, and Alexis, and we'll try to get to as many questions as we can. We may also ask you to once we identify your question, ask you to, pose the question or comment, because we do want to get your experiences as well. So we are spotlighting our HR Awards program. Nominations are open. You can go to hrawards.org and you can apply for the program. Nominations will be taken till August. It's a pretty simple process. If you need any help, I'm happy to help walk you through the process. And both Linda and Alexis, again, were honored last year, so they'll probably touch on a little bit of what led to their being honored. So we'd love to have you if you're interested, or if you know a company that you would propose be nominated, please let us know. So again, we're going to start with Linda. Linda is the EVP and Chief Human Resource Officer for Bryn Mawr Trust. She started in March of 2019. She's involved in strategic planning, leadership development, employee training and engagement, diversity and inclusion, in a very strategic role with the organization, and has previous experience both in HR and also as a Chief Administrative Officer with Mercadia, and has had other positions as well. And she's very entrepreneurial. I know a little bit about Linda's business from past conversations. I don't know if you want to touch on that, but I found that very interesting. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Linda, and she's going to talk a little bit about her experience. And she was honored as an HR Department of the Year award winner last year. So, and some of the reasons that she was honored were leave and safety policies, communications, making sure employees felt cared for, setting up an employee assistance fund with people who had hardships. So a lot of good stuff last year. So with that, we're gonna spotlight Linda, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Scott. Pleasure to be here. And first, I thought I would just spend about 30 seconds talking about Bryn Mawr Trust, a little bit about my background, and then roll into the topic at hand today, preparing to bring back the workforce after the pandemic. So Bryn Mawr Trust is a 130-year-old plus community bank. We have about over 4 billion in deposits. And then we also have a very large wealth management division where we have over 20 billion in assets under management. We transact business all over the country, but we are located in the greater Philadelphia area, Hershey and Princeton. We have about 630 employees. Our headquarters is in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania, hence Bryn Mawr Trust. But since the pandemic, except for our retail personnel, some wealth personnel, then other support folks, we've been working mostly remote, which I'll absolutely touch on in a little bit. As far as my background, I am the CHRO of Bryn Mawr Trust. Started, like Scott said, in 2019. And prior to that, I was doing something entrepreneurial for a while. I'll talk about that in a second, because I really think that has helped me in my career and helped to inform a lot of decisions I made. But I spent over 20 plus years in the corporate world in various commercial real estate finance companies. Like Scott said, I was the head of HR, but for a greater portion of that time, I was the chief administrative officer. I oversaw everything back office that people didn't want to think about. IT, HR, marketing, facilities, stuff people just wanted to work when they showed up in the office. Took a brief time away from the corporate world and decided to open my own cafe. I love to cook, love to serve. And so I had a little breakfast lunch stop in Skipback called Ashley's Cafe after my daughter. And then decided it was time to go back into the corporate world and re-entered in 2019 as Bryn Mawr Trust CHRO. Had lots and lots of great plans. Never imagined that a year into it, we would be leaving the office and we would transition from a company that was very, very much rooted into going into the office every day and didn't really have a remote workforce into a company where the majority of our employees were suddenly working from home. And there were so many things to figure out. And like Scott said, human resources became the hub for figuring out policies, figuring out protocols, figuring out how to effectively communicate with employees, how to keep employees engaged when so many folks were doing exactly what we're doing, looking at a screen for so many hours in the day. And so before I talk about preparing to bring people back into the office, I thought it was a good idea just to sort of go through some of the things that we did to try and keep employees engaged, to try and continue the Bryn Mawr Trust culture in a time where people not only felt disconnected at work, but disconnected from society, right? I mean, a year ago, I think many of us were sneaking out to the grocery store at just specific times, bringing everything home, probably, wiping everything with Clorox wipes or some creative bleach solution or something like that. And that just added so much stress to employees that we needed to think about. And so, as we were starting this whole idea of remote working, which was not our choice, we had to figure out, like I said, how to keep employees engaged. And so what we started to do was we started to do monthly all-employee webcasts, which were communications from our CEO, generally, on hot topics, on protocols, on just what's going on in the company, trying to connect those that had to go into the office because banking was considered an essential service, and keeping those folks connected to the people who were working remotely, working from home. And everybody, whether they were going into the office or at home, were juggling so many things, juggling childcare, juggling figuring out how to stay safe during the pandemic, juggling schooling and figuring out, okay, if I have to go into my branch or office, then what happens to my kids? And so in addition to our all-employee webcast with our CEO, we also started a series where we brought in a psychologist, and we would have our CEO interview a psychologist, and she did an awesome job at giving people tips, talking about, how that you could expect to feel, what was normal anymore. And normal seemed to change on a monthly, sometimes weekly basis during 2020, and figuring out, how to navigate through all the uncertainty. And we received so much positive feedback from having those all-employee webcast interviews that we continued them internally, but then through our corporate responsibility committee started to offer those webcast interviews with the psychologist externally as well. It's a series that we are continuing, and I think our next one is set for sometime in July. But then additional things that we did to try and keep the culture going, we encouraged non-work type of WebExes or Zoom calls where people were spending time catching up with each other. Something that was missing was that, 5 or 10 minutes you spend before or after a meeting in a conference room. How often did you walk back to your office or your cubicle with a coworker and you shared things about what you did this weekend or what your kids were doing or the sporting event that your kids were participating in? And so much of that was just hard to do. And it took real work to try and encourage managers and employees to participate in these kind of like non-work WebEx Zoom calls. In the very beginning, everyone was doing happy hours, right? Well, there's only so many times you can do happy hours, and there's people who might be uncomfortable participating in happy hours. So encouraging these times that are during the day and not at an off time, but maybe it's from 12 to 12:30 or 1 to 1:30 or something like that. Some of our departments would get together for morning coffee. So it would be like a 8:30 to 9 o'clock meeting where people were just on the Zoom or on the WebEx call and could spend time together. Additionally, some of our executives and next level managers also started to hold what we called office hours, essentially an hour and a half on a Friday morning where any of their division employees could log into a WebEx. WebEx is our conferencing tool of choice, but could log into the WebEx or Zoom and just ask questions. We accept questions ahead of time that the presenter, whether it's one of the executives or another manager, would answer and respond to. But then also we would invite questions to come into the chat that could be answered on an ad hoc basis. And if we don't have the answers, we say as such, and then make sure that there's follow-up to get back to employees. We continue those office hours today because we are still largely remote, and I'll talk about our plans in a couple of minutes. The other thing that we deal with, and we're dealing with it now, as I'm sure all of you are, is the idea of what mitigation protocols are we putting in place, what have been put in place. What we're doing now versus what we did a year ago is different. What we're doing now versus what we did last month is different with regard to mitigation protocols for the virus. And HR plays such an important role in figuring that stuff out. We have to do the research. We have to try and weed through everything that's coming across the media, the internet, and to figure out what are we going to instruct our employees to do, because we not only have our employees to be concerned about, but our clients as well, whether it's clients we're meeting with or clients that are coming into our retail branches on a day-to-day basis. And so the latest political and social hot potato is mask wearing. Do you require masks? Do you not require masks? The guidance, the 3 states that we're in, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. New Jersey and Delaware is pretty clear cut. New Jersey is all masks. Delaware is follow CDC guidelines. It's essentially vaccinated, no mask, not vaccinated, mask. But Pennsylvania, and especially we have locations in Philadelphia, it's kind of all over the place. Some reports you read, it says follow CDC guidelines. Other reports you say it says no masks indoors until 70% of Pennsylvanians are vaccinated. And so trying to navigate that this particular week has been a challenge for us. And we want to be careful, again, that we're doing things to keep employees and clients safe, but then also trying to follow the different mandates and guidelines. The other political and social hot potato is vaccinations. To mandate them or to not mandate them, to require vaccination cards or to not require vaccination cards. And after a lot of strong, healthy debate, where we ended up was that we really don't have an interest in trying to mandate someone's health choices. We don't want people to feel bullied about health choices either. So we determined to not make vaccines mandatory, but rather strongly encourage and provide information and provide data to employees that they could see, they could research on their own and make the decision on their own whether they wanted to be vaccinated or not. We also determined that we really didn't have an interest in checking vaccination cards. Such a fine line on the, when you think about HIPAA rules, and are we asking too much about personal health information if we start to ask for vaccine cards? So we made the decision that in locations where folks can not have to wear masks if they have been vaccinated, it's kind of an honor system, self-attesting. If someone is not wearing a mask, we communicate it very clearly that in our minds, they are self-attesting that they have been vaccinated. We also made the statement that if vaccinated folks want to wear masks, that's up to them as well. And so, trying to figure those protocols out and update them as the information on the ground changes is something that HR is heavily involved in at Bryn Mawr Trust all of the time. So thinking about all of those things, I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about our return to office strategy and our location strategy going forward. So probably back last summer, I want to say it was July or August, because we found at Bryn Mawr Trust that working remotely was going so well, and that people were able to perform their functions who were actually working remotely, that there was that connection between those going into a Bryn Mawr location and those working remotely. We determined that on a go-forward basis, we would migrate to a mostly remote working company. And what does that mean? What that means is that we were able to evaluate our real estate footprint, figure out exactly what we needed as terms of office space and office locations. And what we decided to do was create a hoteling environment. So in other words, kind of like sometimes you'll see in public accounting firms, folks can, if they need to go into the office for critical work, for a meeting with clients, for a team meeting with managers, once we actually return to the office, which I'll cover in a second, folks can do what we call hoteling. They can reserve space, they can reserve a conference room, a cubicle, an office in order to conduct the business that they're conducting, and then they can go from there. So everyone, we designated a home base office, if you will. So everyone is attached to a particular Bryn Mawr Trust location. But if, for example, I need to go in, but it's only me, to do work, I don't necessarily have to travel to my home base location of the Bryn Mawr location, but rather I can hotel in our Limerick retail office if there's space available. And so we had our IT create a whole reservation process in order to hotel. We had our facilities department come up with protocols for cleaning space when you're done using it, figuring out what's needed at that space. And our technology department also came up with, okay, here's a cubicle package, if you will, here's an office package, here's items you can expect to be in a conference room. And so we've had that teed up and ready to go, but we have not released it because we've been kicking the can down the road on when we're actually going to return to office. Well, this week we announced that that date is going to be September 20th. So after, or effective, I should say, September 20th, folks can start to use our hoteling reservation system. They can start to come into the office to, again, have critical meetings, perform critical work, or have department meetings and so on and so forth. And so that has been well received by our employees. The reason why we put the date out so far is a couple reasons, I guess. We wanted to make sure that we were giving employees as much notice as possible, because let's face it, it's been more than a year that people have been working remotely. And so all of a sudden the idea of going back into the office can cause a lot of stress. It can cause stress about childcare. It can cause stress about schooling. It can cause stress about, oh my gosh, do I have clothes that fit that I have to wear and go back into the office? And so we wanted to give employees a lot of time to prepare. And we thought a couple of months was appropriate. And then I think as people are coming back into the office, once we start that process in September, we're going to have to be very patient. I think we're going to have to exhibit patience and grace when we're dealing with employees, because it will feel so different. Remember a year ago when we started to talk about everybody's working remote now, and we all had to get used to that. We all had to get used to these back-to-back Zoom calls. We had to get used to the dog barking in the background or the cat jumping on the screen. Well, now we have to get used to being away from our pets or our kids all day and going into the office. So I think that it's super critical that as we start to bring people back, we are patient and we work with employees. If there are employees who have issues with any of the things that I mentioned, we want to make sure that we are thinking about them and thinking about all the stressors that they're going to have to deal with when they start to come back to the office. So Scott, I wasn't sure. I keep seeing some questions pop up, so I didn't know if there were any questions in the queue.
Yeah, so got a couple people that have questions. Kevin Stump, if we can unmute him or he can unmute himself, he has a question for you. So we get Kevin. Kevin, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
We can.
Yep.
All right, there you are. Hi.
How are you?
Everybody. Thank you, Scott. Appreciate it. Hi, Linda. Hi, Alexis. So, there's a lot coming around. It's really a lot of pushback to me is around experimental versus, when it's accepted, right? So did that come into your mindset when you were determining not to pull cards, if you will, for the vaccine?
So what came into our mind was the fact that we just don't want to ask for health information, that we don't want to say okay, you need to show me your card, you need to show me your card, because I know it's again, all over the media about, hey, and look at social media, here's my vaccination card, but people are volunteering that information in that instance. And so we did not want to get into the business of asking people to disclose health information.
So I know we're not there yet, but I mean, my take is this is going down the measles, mumps, rubella kind of mentality where it's going to be a required vaccine, right? Maybe not. But I think at that point, it becomes a different conversation. But I don't, right now, we're opting not to pull cards as well. But we are protected on the PHI side because it's not determined to be PHI because it's really just a vaccination card. There's no other information on there. But that's just kind of where we are as well. But I know this is kind of going down a different path once it's accepted or not accepted and
Right.
what they determine the vaccine to be. So.
Right. Yeah. And if it does get there, which I agree with you, it might end up on the list of required vaccinations, like for school kids or whatever, that then we still definitely wouldn't want to ask for cards. And especially given our business, we're a bank. Healthcare businesses, healthcare workers, that's a different story. But for us, we're not going to.
And just as a secondary, it was thrown around, and I don't know if you or anyone else on the call have any knowledge. Do you know if anyone requiring it upon hire at this point? Because although it's not your employee base, but it's coming upon, so it's really another different scenario.
The only time I've heard of that is in healthcare facilities. Okay. I'm on a couple of CHRO groups, and my observation is the only businesses that were requiring it are more specifically healthcare related.
Okay, thank you for your time. Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Kevin. We have a couple more questions, Linda, if you're willing.
Sure.
Kathleen Newhauser, good to have you here, and if you can unmute yourself, you can ask your question.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Excellent. I just was curious about if you have any kind of plan for a hybrid approach going forward. Once restrictions are lifted, are you going to continue to allow people to work virtually, even on a partial basis?
Yeah, so as part of our location strategy for Bryn Mawr Trust, we made the decision that we would continue to allow people to work virtually, and that we wouldn't necessarily be mandating folks have to be in the office 2, 3, 4, 5 days a week, but rather we would leave it up to the individual departments. Like as an example, in HR, if my folks are working remotely and that's all fine and they want to continue to work remotely, then they could. But let's say on a monthly basis, I have a department meeting where it would be like an all hands department meeting, then I would ask them to come in at that time. Again, assuming all restrictions are lifted and the world is a safer place again. But yes, we made the decision that we were going to very much continue the virtual work.
How are you going to make sure that that's applied fairly across the board?
So the way that my HR department is structured, I have 4 HR business partners who are connected to the 4 different parts of our business, and they work very closely with their executives and managers and would report back and keep an eye on things.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Kathleen. A couple more questions, if you're okay with that, Linda.
Sure.
My good friend Michael Furman has a question. Michael, would you like to ask your question?
Hi, Linda.
Hi, Michael.
The question I had was whether you're providing guidance, like you described how the management had a view that you would not ask about vaccinations. Did you provide any guidance to your employees that you didn't want that to be an office discussion either, that there were certain boundaries that maybe you would encourage them not to talk about? So even though management wasn't doing it, you didn't want the employees to, what's the right word, sort of raise up the issue that you were trying to leave out of the workplace.
Yeah, no, we didn't give that direction specifically to employees to not talk about it at the workplace. What we definitely gave employees instructions on is to not start to ask about vaccinations of those who are wearing masks versus those not wearing masks. We also gave the direction to not confront clients. If clients walk into one of our location without a mask, I mean, we just recommended distancing and just all of our safe mask wearing practices, but we didn't specifically say to employees, don't talk about vaccinations.
But the idea that you have customer facing people, you were providing guidance to them on how to interact with others.
Correct. We provided guidance to, we didn't just limit the guidance to those who are customer facing, but the guidance was distributed to all employees.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And Leticia, we'll take one more question and then we'll move on to Alexis if that's okay. But Linda, I'll give you a chance too if you have any closing comments. So Leanne, I don't even want to take a chance with your last name, but so Leanne, would you be open to asking your question? So I don't know if we can unmute Leanne or, well, I'll ask her question. She said, to what degree, if any, have you surveyed your employees and have you gotten any key insights from that?
Yes, we did conduct surveys on return to office and preference of working virtually or going back into the office. And I would say, obviously, for those who could, the survey was for those who could work remotely, but I would say overwhelmingly people wanted the option to continue to be able to work virtually, at least on a partial basis. We did have a handful of folks who just don't have areas in their residence that are conducive to remote working and to having a remote office. So, there were those folks who said, my goodness, please let me back in the office like as quick as humanly possible. But overwhelmingly, most people wanted to continue to have the option, and that was definitely part of our decision making.
Thank you. So Linda, why don't you maybe make some closing comments and then we'll move on from there, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. Once again, thank you for the questions, and thank you for listening to our pandemic journey and where we're going next. I mean, I think that facts on the ground will change, and we're going to have to be able to change with them as they come up. And we just try and stay as connected as we can with the different state websites, with the CDC, to make sure that we're trying to provide as safe as a place possible for our employees and clients. So, but Scott, thank you, and over to you.
Great. Thank you, Linda. We're grateful to have you today. Thanks so much. So we're going to move on now to Alexis. And Alexis is Manager of People and Processes at Helping Hands Family and also an honoree from the HR Awards. Alexis has over 8 years of experience in strategic HR management within healthcare. Again, very strategic, optimizing talent, retention, and rewards. Has a passion for aligning team member and company success. So we are thrilled to have Alexis here today. She was honored, or her company was honored, in the area of employee engagement, and I'm sure you're going to touch on that, and specifically spotlighting and reactions on social media, check-ins with the team to make sure that they're heard, open door policies, which we heard also from Linda, to reach out, and then other HR initiatives, including switching to a new HRIS system, an ATS, and some changes in the benefits. So with that, Alexis, we will turn it over to you.
All right, thank you. So my name is Alexis, and I work for a company that specializes in applied behavioral analysis. And we work specifically with children 18 months to 18 years old through commercial medical insurance. If you're unfamiliar with ABA therapy, it is the only scientific medically endorsed therapy for children to help learn those critical skills in order for them to achieve their best potential. We are uniquely a startup business. We chose to start up in a pandemic environment, which has been really exciting and come with some discomfort. So we've been seeing clients for about a year. And we started because we wanted to close the care gap. So children with autism can wait anywhere from 6 to 9 months for services, which can set them back developmentally from where they could potentially be. Since March of 2020, we've doubled in size. So we serve over 100 clients across New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York, and have over 300 employees and contractors across those 3 states. What's interesting in our field is because we are a service and such a personalized service, we uniquely cross boundaries between HR and operations. So our staff pair and bond with our clients in such a way that when we're thinking of HR business factors, we have to think about the client's needs along with that. So one of the first things we had to do is figure out how to deliver therapy in a pandemic and make sure that the children are receiving the services, but our employees are staying safe. So our ops team was wonderful and figured out a way to do Zoom sessions with the children. It's not as effective sometimes, but it gave them something where other children had been waiting forever. When I first joined the company, I remember hearing this story that we had a child who joined with us as our first client, and she had been waiting 18 months for services. And once the pandemic hit, her parents were immensely grateful that we didn't say, nope, we have to stop, we have to pause. We came up with a backup plan so they could receive those services, but so we could also keep our employees safe. We also had the unique situation of we didn't have a culture. We were building it. We were brand new. When I came on, there was a management team of 4 people. We're about 12 people now in our management team, but we had all these new hires starting in this pandemic environment, and we didn't really know who we were. So we had this really unique opportunity to get that employee buy-in, get that employee engagement, and do things like let them vote on our mission, vision, and values. Yes, we had some ideas in mind, and yes, we knew what we wanted to be, but get their buy-in. So even the way that our values are listed on the website, our employees voted for. The exact words that we used to define our values, the employees had to say it. Not just management, we weren't just sitting in a room. We got everybody involved. Another thing that we did and continue to do is all our new hires participate in a CEO welcome. So they will attend a meeting, and we have, some of them can be intimate groups. We onboard 2 to, I would say, 12 employees every 2 weeks. And our CEO gets on this call and talks directly to them. He asks everyone, where they're from, what they do, what their background is, and make it really personal. And one of the first things we do is thank them for choosing this field. Because not only is it not an easy field, they could choose a field with less risk because they are going into our clinics and they are going into our clients' homes at this point. So that is something that we want to continue doing. And we had some unique hurdles with masking because we were continuing therapy. I would say after probably the first 3 months of the pandemic, we started going very slowly back into working in the office or in the homes because it's just better for the children we serve. And we found that masks can impede therapy. If a child has any speech development issues or we're trying to teach them how to read facial expressions, it just wasn't really working. And I remember one of our brand new employees coming to us and saying, you know what, I got a solution. I saw online that there's these masks that are clear and we can use them to do therapy and everyone can be safe and we can do the best we can do. So our CEO got online, went on Amazon and ordered a bunch of them to be delivered out to all of the staff. So that way they could be productive. We were giving them the correct PPE, but we could make a difference in a more impactful way. Now we are continuing to mask, but because we are healthcare, we kind of have a policy where if the mask impedes the child's progress, the employee is vaccinated, so they voluntarily disclose that, and the family has consented and signed off, we will do the therapy on masks, but it's a very collaborative effort and on a one-on-one basis. If not all parties are consenting, then we mask. We wear the mask. We don't want to take that risk. In speaking of vaccines, being in the autism community, vaccines in general can be very controversial. So we have taken the approach, a little bit like Linda, where we said, you know what, it's your choice. You can voluntarily disclose to us, but we are going to give you all the information we can and strongly recommend that you get a vaccine. But if not, it's okay, it's fine. The only exception to that is we have unique relationships with some of the schools and daycares that these children are attending. So if a daycare has a policy that says anybody coming into this place must have a vaccine. We do ask the employee to disclose. And if they don't feel comfortable disclosing, we do have to remove them from the case. So if we get into a little bit of a tricky situation there, but everyone really knows the policy, everyone understands why it's there, and everyone is really respectful because it's someone else's policy. We're going into their place of employment and they want to make sure their customers, their employees are safe. We had a unique hurdle of fairness. So once our employee started seeing the clients again in person, we were hearing a lot, well, why is management at home? Why aren't they in the office? Why aren't they doing things? And we kind of took it really seriously and took a systematic approach to it to say, okay, who should be in person? Who should be traveling? Who should be doing these things? So we kind of looked at it and said, you know what? It's really important that few key people travel. Our COO, who has a clinical background, people like myself. So in our clinics, we would travel, we would have a presence, we would be safe, we would, do a walkthrough just to make sure all the policies and procedures are being followed. But we would also get hands-on. One of my favorite stories about our COO is we were reviewing data and we saw that this one kid was not going to get sessions because their RVT, which is just the direct therapist, was quarantined. And she said, I'll do it. And she went into the clinic and she did the sessions with the kid. And it really helped foster that sense of community in our new culture and in the idea that we're all in this together. No one of us is above going in and helping. I personally, when I go to the clinics, I'm not clinical at all, but I know enough to know what I don't know. So if someone, needs to tap out for a bathroom break, I can sit in the session with certain children and keep an eye on it so that way they can get done what they need to do. But also we're following our own safety protocols and procedures. We also have rolled out a rewards and recognition program. That is, it's pretty unique. It's personalized by leadership. So we have people submit, this person did really great, or if we see an employee review or a parent review, we have a unique way to call them out. So we'll tell the COO or the CEO, hey, here's all the details. We saw this person really went out of their way. This person, went to the session, got it done. The next therapist was late, stayed on the session, made sure everything was running. They get a personalized call. And the person has all the details. Oh, hi, this is, so-and-so. We're so happy. Like, we're so proud. Thank you for doing everything you do. And we're continuing that. Even on a leadership side, every Monday, we have Monday morning celebrations, and we go through those celebrations as a team, and it will call out something as simple as, hey, so-and-so, passed their exam, they're now an RVT, or this person, passed their exam, they're now a BCBA. And because we're traveling, sometimes those are done in the clinic. So recently we had a unique opportunity to invite one of those people we were celebrating and honoring to the call so they could be a part of it and see kind of what we do all the time. Another thing that we've kind of done to help with that employee engagement, because remember, we're very new, we're building this culture, is we decided as a management team that we really didn't know each other. So we started Friday Huddles, and we would have each person pick an activity. So it could be something as simple as playing categories together online to Two Truths and a Lie, or going over a value and having an activity that goes with that value. We found it so meaningful that not only do we continue it now, we've rolled it out to all of our clinics, and each clinic has some semblance of that huddle. So that way, no matter where they are in the field, they have that sense of community. So, Scott, I think you're muted.
I am muted. Thanks, Alexis. We do have a couple questions. And this could be to Linda also, but so we learned a lot, we think, right, as organizations during the last year. And we tried a lot of different things. What are some of the key learnings from last year that make sense for the organization going forward? And not only make sense, but that you want to build on. Like, can you think of a couple of things that you've learned, from the remote way of working that not only do you want to maintain, but you want to enhance?
Yeah, I would say our sense of community. It really is a community. The field is a community, and we want to find ways to get better at that, to do it differently, to do it bigger, to incorporate more safely in-person ways of doing that, but not lose that fun aspect that we really tried hard and really had to think about in a pandemic to build into the culture, because everything you're doing isn't always fun, especially if you're those people trying to put together the policies or the procedures, or like you might have a bad day out, with one of the clients. But we want to bring it back towards, we want that sense of community. We want that celebration, or very purposeful celebration is actually one of our core values. I find that pretty unique in what a company says is valuable. And we want to do it in a bigger, grander way. And we want the employees' feedback on it.
Great. And Linda, I don't know if you had any thoughts on that same question.
Yeah, what we learned as soon as you were asking it, what we learned is that it is possible to work virtually. We were so against working virtually as a company in our past, and just having to go through the pandemic and being forced to have people work remotely showed us that, hey, it is possible. And that opens up recruitment, that opens up flexible schedules. And I would suggest that now going, kind of moving past the pandemic, or as past as we can get, I really think companies are going to have to consider seriously continuing to offer that hybrid option to continue to be competitive in the marketplace.
Great. We have another question, kind of about change management or resistance to change. So the question is, if you're trying to encourage people to come back to work, either, full-time, hybrid, whatever, and, they've just kind of gotten used to being at home, working from home, and there's some resistance to them coming back. Even though you believe as an organization that you need some level of face-to-face. How are either one of your companies going to deal with that resistance to change? Because we know once somebody gets comfortable with the situation, it's hard for them, to change that. Either one of you.
I was going to say that's a funny question from my end, because we're a company of behavior analysts. So we're always trying to figure out what is the better way to do it. How do we motivate a person to do this differently or better? And our strategy for those who have been resistant is to say, you know what, we hear what you're saying. What plan works for you? We identify this as being something important to us, but we don't want to put any pressure on you. Is it 1 day a week? Is it coming in a half day? Is it you need 3 months to plan to come back? We'll listen to it, and we'll come up with a plan that works together, because that's what we do. We analyze the behaviors, and then we figure out a way to make it work for everybody.
Great. And
Yeah,
Linda?
and I would say we're probably less flexible and to be able to do that and work with folks on an individual basis. Rather, we're taking that blanket approach where we're giving folks enough time, enough notice. And then I would imagine as we are asking people to come in, we want to be able to show the value. Why do we? We're not asking you just because we, are asking you because we want to be jerks about it, but rather we think it's important to our culture, or it's an important project, or I think we would have to make sure there's a value proposition for folks as we're asking them to come back.
Great. Thank you. Another question is around talent acquisition. How is your talent engagement or talent attraction strategy changed based on what you've learned over the last year? In other words, do you have more selling marketing points than you had before about, hey, here's a reason to join us because we've created this culture? And how has that impacted on your talent acquisition strategy?
I'll take that one first. So talent acquisition has been hard. It's definitely been hard throughout the pandemic, especially in the virtual world we're in, trying to get people used to interviewing virtually, and inevitably something goes wrong with the technology, or, and that could reflect badly, or there could be a perceived perception that it would reflect badly. So as we have been working through the past year, we are trying to show candidates coming in that there is real collaboration, even though it's online, that we do make sure that our managers are meeting with their employees, even though it's virtually, that we have sort of these checks and balances throughout the organization to make sure that there's that level of interaction. But it's just recruiting in general has been challenging.
Thank you. Alexis, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I'm not sure that the pandemic changed how we recruit. We had to figure out a way to do it virtually, but it's a very competitive field. So our candidate pool has not gotten any bigger or any smaller. It's always been very small. So you're always competing for like the same 3 people who might have just graduated in the town that you want to hire in. What we got the opportunity to do is say, who do we want to hire? What is the right profile to hire? And how do you solve for those, less tangible things of, can they work with children? How do you assess that over a video interview? So we came up with very specific profiles and questions, and introduced kind of a virtual shadowing component where if someone was interviewing the clinic, they would go and say, oh, hi, this is the RBT, this is the child they're working with today, and see how they engage. And we actually do this now when we have in-person interviews. It could be something as simple as, did they say hi to the child? Did they attempt to make an interaction or a connection with the child? Or did they go stand in the corner and, seem really nervous about being put in that situation? So we use it as an opportunity to figure out who fits our culture and how do we get to them faster.
Great. So we'll take one more question, and then I think we'll just do a wrap up. Alexis, if you have any kind of final comments, and then if either one of you have any final comments, and then we'll wrap up. So the last question is, University of Pennsylvania Health System announced either yesterday or today that they are going to require vaccines, and that will be by a certain date. So that's a pretty big deal. It was front page of the business section of the Inquirer. How much influence, when a large organization like this, one of the largest employers in Philly, makes a decision like that, how much influence do you think it has either on your companies or in the business community in general? And is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Yeah, I'll take that. I was laughing as soon as you asked the influence question, because I would say a lot. So throughout the pandemic, as soon as those front page headlines would come out, whether it was locally or nationally, or in the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times, or insert the periodical, inevitably it would cross my email, right? Like some employer would send it to me and say, hey, this is what PNC is doing. Like, hey, this is what this person is doing. Hey, and so as we were moving through the past year plus, certainly we would look at those things and they would inform our decision. We wouldn't necessarily do something just because, like, for example, a lot of bank lobbies were opening way before we did, and it was kept making the news. And so our employees were like, are we opening our lobbies? And you're like, no, we're waiting, we're being more conservative. But it was important for us to keep up to date on everything that was happening with either local or national big companies, because employees will read it, they will send it to you. And so you want to make sure that you're prepared, and again, use that information to inform your decision-making process.
Thank you. Alexis, any thoughts on that decision or communication?
Yeah, so I would say influence, I would agree. It's a lot. Every time a new regulation comes out in some of our places in New York, it's by the county. It's so specific. I would get an influx, no matter how many alerts I had on anything. Like, an employee would inevitably send it to me first. Are we doing this? What are we doing? Why aren't we doing this? So it's influenced how we communicate out our why and our transparency, but it hasn't necessarily influenced our policies, just because vaccinations are so controversial within our field, we also have to be mindful of our clients and their wants and their needs and kind of balance them out and make sure we're doing everything we can to protect our employees, but not ignoring the other population, which is the whole reason we exist.
Great. Well, I want to thank both of you today for your wonderful and informational comments about the past, present, and future. So we are going to kind of wrap up here and just talk again about nominations being open. If either your company or you have you have somebody that you would like to nominate, or your own company. So hrawards.org. And again, I'm going to just put my contact information in the chat, so so everyone can have that. And let's see, I'm trying to, let me just get that before we cut everybody off. Scott Rosen. All right, so we are a wrap for today, and I believe we're going to get the recordings out to everyone so that you can, if you want to re-listen or listen to the recording from today. Again, we want to thank Linda and Larry for your technical support, and Linda and Alexis for participating in today's program, and actually to all the attendees for your attention. So be well, and we'll hopefully talk to everybody soon. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.